There's talk in the air, and it's getting louder by the minute. Monken is reportedly sitting on something big for Shedeur Sanders, and when this finally comes to light, the NFL might be caught completely off guard.
Into things. So, Cleveland Browns wide receiver coaching room will be brand new, starting fresh. The guys they was here with Stefanski, gone. Packed them up, shipped them out. They are gone. Chad O'Shea was already gone. And now we have this. Browns head coach Todd Monken has another opening on his offensive staff.
Is the Cleveland Browns hire of Todd Monken. This went down the other day and was a surprise to a lot of people who thought Jim Schwartz would wind up being the pick. And if it wasn't him, it would be Nathan Shielhaas. So why do you go this way? Well, the number one thing to look at here, I think, is the player development piece of it. And it's going to be such an important piece of where the Browns are going over the next couple of years. They have invested heavily.
It's crazy to think how much of a dumpster fire this organization is. The Cleveland Browns just hired a coach that couldn't even get along with a two-time MVP. And now he needs to develop Shedeur Sanders. The reason for this is nobody really wanted the Cleveland Browns coaching job. So the Browns just fired Kevin Stefanski. He won 2 Coach of the Year awards during his tenure with the Cleveland Browns. Plan A was Jesse Minter, but he pulled his name out of consideration.
Kevin Stefanski just witnessed everything he built start collapsing in less than 2 days. Todd Monken didn't simply step into the Cleveland Browns organization. He stormed in and drew a clear line in the sand against anyone he believed was blocking Shedeur Sanders' rise. Chad O'Shea? Out the door. Stephen Bravo Brown? On a flight to Dallas. Tommy Ree and the rest of Kevin Stefanski's trusted receiver room coaches? Cleared out like they were never part of the plan. And now more details are surfacing. This wasn't routine turnover. This wasn't business as usual. What happened in Cleveland looks and feels like a full-scale reset. Word behind the scenes is that Monken is convinced Shedeur Sanders hasn't been given a fair shot since day one. And he's not willing to risk history repeating itself. Think about the names tied to this situation: Baker Mayfield, Jameis Winston, Deshaun Watson. Quarterbacks who arrived with promise, expectations, and the weight of a franchise on their shoulders. Monken reportedly believes the same pattern that stalled their development was forming again. And instead of watching it unfold, he acted fast. Now the bigger mystery: was Stefanski aware of what was happening around him? Or was there internal resistance working quietly beneath the surface? Was this a coordinated approach, or did Monken uncover something he couldn't ignore? Regardless of the answer, the message has been delivered loud and clear across the NFL. If you're not fully committed to building Shedeur Sanders into the future of this franchise, then you won't be part of the future at all.
Tommy Rees, gone. Kevin Stefanski, gone. Chad O'Shea, who was the pass game coordinator and receivers coach, he's gone. He's with the Kansas City Chiefs now. And it says these are just some of the adjustments.
I think every player and every coach is always under construction. We are always learning and getting better. And I think we're in the development business. So any player that you get, you're fighting like hell to develop them and try to using what their elite trait is. You're always trying to find what that is. Where can they add value within a game plan? For instance, Wes Welker's with the Dolphins, catching 60 balls. They're a pro-style offense. He goes to New England. He's a 100-catch guy playing in the slot, Hall of Famer, right? Where can you find pieces that can play at an elite level of what you're asking them to do? For instance.
All right, I already know what some of you are saying. Here we go again. Another coaching shakeup in Cleveland. Same movie, different year. And normally, you'd be right. But this situation? This feels different. This isn't just another front office shuffle or a routine reset. This is Todd Monken walking through the doors, scanning that offensive meeting room, and basically saying, I don't see anyone here ready to shape a generational quarterback. And as bold as that sounds, he might not be wrong. So let's slow this down and really unpack what just happened, because the sequence of events is almost unbelievable. Todd Monken gets named head coach, and within days, not weeks, not months, days, he starts making moves. And not small ones either. We're talking about a full-blown overhaul. Chad O'Shea, the pass game coordinator and wide receivers coach? Gone. Kansas City scooped him up. Stephen Bravo Brown, who had been embedded in that receiver room for 6 seasons as assistant wide receivers coach? He's packing for Dallas to join the Cowboys. Offensive coordinator Tommy Rees? Out. And that's just the headline portion. The list keeps going. Travis Switzer, George Warhop, Daniel Stern, Ian Cole, Mike Bloomgren, Danny Breyer, Jeff Blasco, even the tight ends coach. One by one, shown the exit. The wide receiver coaching room? Completely rebuilt from the ground up. Not a single familiar face from the Kevin Stefanski era left standing. Zero carryover. Clean slate. And here's where it really starts to raise eyebrows. These weren't random hires. These were Stefanski's guys. His staff. The people he personally trusted to implement his system and shape his offense. And Monken stepped in, looked at that entire structure, and essentially said, "This isn't going to cut it for what we're about to build." Now that's not just a coaching change. That's a philosophical shift. Then NFL insider Albert Breer went on the radio and peeled back another layer of this story. And once you hear what he said, the bigger picture starts snapping into focus. According to Breer, when the Browns made this hire, they weren't just looking for a play caller. They were thinking long-term. They were thinking development. He specifically mentioned that the organization was focused on who they wanted, guiding a roster that includes a promising rookie class. Names like Mason Graham, Carson Switzer, Quinshon Judkins, and Harold Fannin. That's young talent. That's foundational talent. And the Browns wanted someone who could mold it properly. But here's the real centerpiece. Development wasn't just important. It was priority number one. Breer explained that Cleveland was drawn to Monken's offensive versatility, the diversity in his scheme, his ability to tailor systems around different skill sets, and most critically, his track record with quarterbacks. And when you lay out that resume, it hits differently. We're talking about a coach who's worked with Dave Garrett in Jacksonville, Jameis Winston in Tampa, Baker Mayfield in Cleveland, and for the past 3 years, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. Think about that range. That's not one style. That's not one prototype. That's pocket passers, gunslingers, structured system guys, dual threat MVP level playmakers. Completely different archetypes, all under one offensive architect. That's not just experience. That's a doctorate in quarterback development across multiple football languages.
Nearly won it again in 2024. So it's developing the quarterback. It's finding a way to build the right offense for whatever type of quarterback it is. It's having the scheme flexibility. It's developing players overall with, again, what's going to be a young team. And I do think like Todd Monken's experience, both at the college level and the pro level, gives him the wherewithal to do it. He's seen guys come through as 18, 19, 20-year-olds in the college game, most recently, of course, at Georgia, but he was the head coach at one point at Southern Miss.
And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. The quiet detail that changes everything. Every single one of those quarterbacks? They produced their best statistical seasons under Todd Monken. Let that sink in. Jameis Winston eclipsed 5,000 passing yards. Baker Mayfield delivered his most efficient campaign as a pro. And Lamar Jackson? Back-to-back MVP-level seasons orchestrating one of the most explosive, nightmare-inducing offenses in the entire league. That's not coincidence. That's pattern. So when Monken steps into Cleveland, surveys what's been going on with quarterback development, and evaluates the infrastructure around that room, do you honestly believe he was going to shrug and keep everything exactly the same? Keep the same voices, the same methods, the same results? This is where the sabotage conversation starts heating up. And before you dismiss it, really sit with this. Shedeur Sanders is not a standard rookie walking into the NFL. He arrived with a spotlight already blazing. More attention. More scrutiny. More built-in expectations than most first-year quarterbacks see in a lifetime. His father is Coach Prime. The cameras follow him everywhere. Sports media dissects his every throw. Social media critiques his breathing pattern. That's the environment he entered. Now ask yourself this. The same coaching group that couldn't fully maximize Baker Mayfield, a number 1 overall pick and Heisman Trophy winner, was suddenly going to unlock Shedeur's full ceiling? Picture it. Shedeur gets drafted by Cleveland. He steps into the facility with something to prove. Chip on his shoulder. Ready to grind. Ready to silence doubters. And what's waiting for him? A receiver coaching room that's been operating the same way for 6 straight years. Familiar routines. Familiar scripts. Familiar philosophy. Chad O'Shea, in the league as a receivers coach since 2009, teaching route combinations that haven't meaningfully evolved. The same progressions. The same structural approach. An offensive mindset that hasn't brought Cleveland sustained success in decades. Now let's be clear. This isn't about accusing anyone of waking up and plotting against Shedeur Sanders. That's not how this league usually works. But here's the uncomfortable truth about the NFL. Sabotage doesn't always look malicious. Sometimes it looks like stubbornness. Sometimes it looks like experience. Sometimes it's just outdated thinking wrapped in credibility. It's calling plays that don't highlight your quarterback's strengths. It's refusing to redesign concepts around a unique skill set. It's forcing a young passer into a rigid framework because that's how we've always done it. And in today's NFL, that mindset can quietly derail a career. Todd Monken saw that dynamic immediately. When Albert Breer pointed out that one of Monken's biggest strengths is the diversity of his offense and his ability to tailor systems around different types of quarterbacks, that wasn't casual praise. That was coded language. That was Cleveland saying, "We need adaptability." That was them acknowledging the difference between molding a system around talent versus forcing talent to conform. And that distinction? That's the gap between hoisting trophies and treading water in mediocrity. But the drama doesn't stop there. Behind the scenes, there's another layer unfolding that most fans haven't fully connected yet. Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator, reportedly believed he had a real shot at the head coaching job. And when Breer started dropping details about the internal dynamics inside that building, it painted a picture of political tension simmering beneath the surface. Because this wasn't just a hire. This was a power shift.
Yesterday on the show, we played this clip, and it was Connor Orr, and you guys were going back and forth, but Connor Orr was making the idea and a suggestion that Monken should distance himself from Shedeur. I think he went as far as to even say that he would get rid of Shedeur off the roster. And it sounded to me like you almost co-signed it. Do you believe that as well, that Monken should distance himself from Shedeur?
Well, I mean, I look, like, did they ask about Shedeur yet?
According to Breer, Jim Schwartz hasn't exactly taken the news lightly. In fact, the word circulating is that he's still frustrated, genuinely upset, about not landing the head coaching position. And it doesn't stop there. Schwartz has reportedly told people close to him that he had no intention of remaining in Cleveland in any role other than head coach. Read that slowly. The defensive coordinator, with multiple years still left on his contract, is essentially signaling that anything short of the top job isn't acceptable. That's not just disappointment. That's tension. That's a power dynamic that can shift the entire energy inside a building. Now pause and imagine you're Shedeur Sanders watching all of this unfold in real time. You've got a defensive coordinator who may be mentally checked out because he didn't get promoted. You had an offensive coaching staff that clearly wasn't aligned with maximizing your development. And the previous head coach's entire framework is being dismantled piece by piece around you. That's instability. That's turbulence. And historically, that's the type of environment where young quarterbacks struggle to survive, let alone thrive. But this is where Todd Monken flips the narrative. He didn't make those staffing decisions just because he had the authority. He made them with intention. With a blueprint in mind. This wasn't random destruction. It was controlled demolition to clear space for something deliberate. Something built specifically to elevate Shedeur Sanders' ceiling. And now it gets even more interesting. During that radio interview, one of the hosts floated a controversial idea, suggesting maybe Monken should distance himself from Shedeur. Maybe even move on from him entirely. And if you listen closely to Breer's tone, you could sense it. There's legitimate debate happening internally about whether Shedeur is truly the guy. Breer confirmed that during the hiring process, every head coaching candidate was asked directly, "How would you develop Shedeur Sanders?" It wasn't optional. It was a central question in the evaluation. That tells you something critical. The Browns absolutely have an investment in him. They want a development plan. They want a vision. The uncertainty isn't about interest, it's about execution. And then Breer introduced a scenario that has Cleveland fans restless. What happens if Shedeur isn't the starter? What if Deshaun Watson opens the season under center? What if Dylan Gabriel gets a look? Would the organization be better off wiping the slate clean entirely? That's the kind of hypothetical that fuels talk shows and ignites comment sections. But here's the bigger picture. This is how the media machine operates. Doubt is easy to manufacture. Skepticism generates clicks. And when you're dealing with a young black quarterback who carries a famous last name, the scrutiny multiplies. It happened to Arch Manning's family in a different way. It's happening now to Shedeur. Why? Because the narrative tension is irresistible. The idea that Coach Prime's son might actually live up to, or even exceed, the hype unsettles people who are comfortable with the status quo. Now let's pivot back to facts. At Colorado, Shedeur Sanders demonstrated composure that many seasoned NFL quarterbacks still struggle to master. His decision-making was sharp. His field vision was advanced. His football IQ consistently showed up on tape. And he did all of that while playing behind one of the most overwhelmed defensive lines in college football. Despite constant pressure, collapsing pockets, and relentless hits, he still produced at a high level. That's not accidental. That's resilience combined with processing speed. He has the arm strength to make every throw. He diagnoses coverages quickly. And his leadership presence? That's something you can't coach into a player. You either have that command in the huddle, or you don't. And Shedeur Sanders has it.
Jim Schwartz, the one thing he did say about Schwartz was like, I didn't come here to coach Schwartz, I came here to coach Myles Garrett, almost just implying that it was like the players were the ones that, and the reason why, not anyone in particular on the coaching staff. So you've been updating it every day. I've seen with your mailbags and everything else. Can you tell the listener what you've heard with Jim Schwartz?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's still sort of in a holding pattern. The Browns will still like him back. He's got a couple years left on his contract. Todd Monken obviously has jumped in on the...
According to Breer, Jim Schwartz hasn't exactly moved on from being passed over for the head coaching position. The frustration is still very real. In fact, word is that Schwartz has told people behind closed doors that he never intended to remain in Cleveland in any capacity other than head coach. Let that sink in for a second. Here's a defensive coordinator with multiple years still left on his contract, essentially signaling that anything short of the top job isn't acceptable. That creates tension. That creates uncertainty. And whether intentional or not, it puts the organization in a difficult spot because now you've got a high-ranking coach who feels slighted. Now put yourself in Shedeur Sanders' shoes as all of this plays out publicly. You're a young quarterback trying to establish yourself in the league. The defensive coordinator might be mentally checked out because he didn't get promoted. The previous offensive coaching staff, the group responsible for quarterback growth, has just been cleared out. And the entire system you were drafted into is being dismantled piece by piece around you. That's instability. That's organizational turbulence. And historically, that's the exact type of setting where promising young quarterbacks struggle to develop. But this is where Todd Monken steps into the spotlight. He didn't move on from those coaches simply because he had the authority. He made those decisions with a clear objective. This wasn't random turnover. It was calculated restructuring. He's building something intentional, something tailored, something engineered specifically to unlock Shedeur Sanders' full potential. And now we get to the part that really stirred the pot. During that radio conversation, one of the hosts, Connor, floated a provocative idea. He suggested that maybe Monken should distance himself from Shedeur. Maybe even consider removing him from the roster altogether. And if you listen closely to Breer's tone, you could sense that there are genuine questions circulating inside the building about whether Shedeur is truly the long-term answer. Breer revealed that during the hiring process, every single head coaching candidate was asked directly, "How would you develop Shedeur Sanders?" It wasn't a casual question. It was part of the formal evaluation. That tells you something important. The Browns are invested in the idea of developing him. They want a plan. They want a roadmap. The real issue isn't interest, it's whether they can elevate him to the level they envision. Breer also presented a scenario that has Cleveland fans debating nonstop. What happens if Shedeur isn't the starter? What if Deshaun Watson opens the season under center? What if Dillon Gabriel gets the opportunity instead? Would the franchise be better off starting fresh entirely? Those hypotheticals are designed to spark reaction. And here's where you have to zoom out and recognize the pattern. This is how the media cycle works. Create doubt. Amplify uncertainty. Question the ceiling. It's a familiar script, especially when the quarterback in question carries a famous last name. We've seen similar dynamics around Arch Manning's family. Now it's happening with Shedeur. Why? Because the possibility that Coach Prime's son could actually fulfill, or even surpass, the hype challenges a lot of narratives. But let's pivot back to substance. At Colorado, Shedeur Sanders displayed composure beyond his years. His decision-making under pressure stood out. His football intelligence consistently showed up on tape. And he accomplished all of that behind one of the most overmatched offensive lines in college football. Despite constant pressure and collapsing pockets, he still produced at an elite clip. That speaks to processing speed. That speaks to confidence. That speaks to preparation. He possesses the arm strength to attack every area of the field. He processes defenses quickly. And his leadership presence, the command he carries in a huddle, isn't something you can manufacture through coaching. You either have those traits, or you don't.
It was like, I didn't come here to coach Schwartz, I came here to coach Myles Garrett, almost just implying that it was like the players were the ones that, and the reason why, not anyone in particular on the coaching staff. So you've been updating it every day. I've seen with your mailbags and everything else. Can you tell the listener what you've heard with Jim Schwartz?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's still sort of in a holding pattern. The Browns will still like him back. He's got a couple years left on his contract. Todd Monken.
Right now, the Browns are reportedly trying to convince Jim Schwartz to stick around. They respect what he brings to the table. He's under contract for multiple years. There's value there. But if he's going to sulk because he didn't land the top job, then maybe a fresh start in Philly, Las Vegas, or wherever else might be better for everyone involved. Because Cleveland is stepping into a brand new chapter, and when you're attempting to develop a franchise quarterback, there's no space for bruised egos or lingering resentment. Now let me tell you what's about to unfold over the next few months, and remember where you heard it first. Todd Monken is going to assemble an entirely reimagined offensive coaching staff. Not recycled names. Not retreads running outdated concepts. Specialists. Coaches who understand modern quarterback evolution. Teachers who know how to amplify a skill set like Shedeur's instead of squeezing it into a rigid framework. The offensive playbook? Expect a transformation. More RPOs. Increased play action. Designs that get Shedeur moving, thinking, and attacking in space. Concepts built to stress defenses horizontally and vertically. Systems that empower him to read, react, and create instead of hesitating in a collapsing pocket. And by week 1 next season, the narrative is going to shift fast. The same voices that questioned Monken's loyalty to Shedeur, the same analysts who floated the clean slate theory, they'll be scrambling for explanations. Because when Shedeur steps into that offense and starts producing, the conversation will flip overnight. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people never wanted this to work. They wanted the experiment to collapse. They wanted Coach Prime's son to stumble so they could dismiss the hype and say it was all smoke and mirrors. But Monken isn't playing along with that script. He removed what he believed were obstacles. He's constructing a system with intention. And he's tying his coaching legacy to the belief that Shedeur Sanders is the real thing. Yes, Kevin Stefanski's staff is gone. And honestly, they had their opportunity. Years to establish sustained success in Cleveland, and the results weren't there. Now it's Monken's blueprint. And he's not spending time on anyone who doesn't align with it. So the bigger question becomes this: are you prepared for what's coming? Because the Cleveland Browns just pivoted from being an afterthought to one of the most compelling storylines in football. They've got a defensive anchor in Myles Garrett. They've added promising young talent. They're holding 2 first-round picks to keep building. And now they have a head coach with a documented track record of elevating quarterbacks. The framework is set. The old guard is out. The perceived roadblocks are gone. And Shedeur Sanders is about to receive what many believe he's deserved from the start. A coaching staff that genuinely believes in him. One designed around his strengths. One committed to proving doubters wrong. Will it be seamless? Of course not. Growth always comes with bumps. Will critics remain loud? Absolutely, that won't change. But when you're serious about building something special, you can't hesitate to dismantle what isn't working. And that's precisely what Todd Monken just did. He surveyed the Cleveland Browns' offensive structure, recognized a pattern of stagnation, and said, "That ends now." For the first time, Shedeur Sanders gets a legitimate opportunity. Not a half measure. Not a symbolic vote of confidence. A real shot, with the right architecture around him, to demonstrate exactly what he can become. So now I'm turning it over to you. Was Monken justified in clearing house? Should every coach tied to the previous regime have been moved out? Or did he go too far in the reset? And most importantly, do you believe Shedeur Sanders is about to surprise the entire league in this new system? Or do you think Cleveland should have taken a different path at quarterback? Drop your take in the comments, because this debate is only getting louder from here. And if you've made it this far, you're one of the real ones who actually understands the magnitude of what's happening. Hit that like button. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. This Shedeur Sanders storyline is just beginning, and you won't want to miss how it unfolds. Let's run it up.